Pedigree Chart. One way geneticists can determine if offspring are going to inherit a genetic trait or a genetic disease is by creating a pedigree chart and analyzing the patterns. A pedigree chart is similar to a family tree, except that it also shows whether each person possesses a specific trait, is a carrier for the trait, or does not possess the alleles for the trait. The chart studies the occurrence of a particular trait in previous generations so that predictions can be made about the probability of the trait showing up in future matings. Genetic counselors construct and analyze pedigree charts from both prospective parents to help them understand the probability of having a child with an inherited trait. The modes of inheritance most commonly identified on pedigree charts are autosomal dominant and recessive, sex-linked dominant and recessive, and cytoplasmic. These are the symbols used in pedigree charts. Square for male, circle for female. If that male or female are affected, then we shade them in, and then mating is shown by a link between them. So if this is the first generation, these are parents, male and female. They have offspring, female and male. These are siblings. If a person is heterozygous for the recessive allele or a carrier, we will half shade them. And if a death occurs, we will cross it out. Autosomal traits. An autosomal trait appears in both males and females with equal frequency. X-linked traits also appear in males and females, but much more frequently in males. Y-linked traits appear only in males. If the trait is autosomal dominant, then every individual with the phenotype for that trait will have a parent with the phenotype for that trait. If the trait is autosomal recessive, then the individual with the phenotype for that trait can have one, two, or neither parent exhibit the phenotype for that trait. The dominant traits can't skip generations, while recessive traits can skip generations. Heterozygous versus homozygous. If an individual has a homozygous dominant or heterozygous genotype, then they will exhibit the dominant phenotype. If an individual is homozygous recessive, then they will exhibit the recessive phenotype. If two individuals are heterozygous for a recessive trait, they will not show the trait phenotypically, but they can produce offspring that are homozygous recessive and do exhibit the traits. Autosomal recessive traits. Not all pedigree charts show the heterozygous genotype. If only the individuals who express the trait are indicated, you must infer, based on expression of the trait in later generations, who is a carrier. In the following exercises, individuals who express the trait will be indicated, regardless of their genotype. In other words, affected heterozygotes will be marked, and unaffected heterozygotes will not be marked. Sex-linked trait. If a trait is sex-linked, it is usually only seen in males because most sex-linked traits are recessive and located on the X chromosome and are called sex-linked recessive. Therefore, a male receiving an X chromosome with the recessive allele will exhibit the traits. A female receiving one X chromosome with the recessive allele is a carrier, but will not exhibit the trait because she also has an X chromosome with the dominant allele. A female will only exhibit the trait if she receives two X chromosomes with the recessive allele. If a sex-linked trait is carried on the Y chromosome, only males can exhibit the trait. This is pretty rare. Sex-linked dominant. The process for sex-linked dominant is similar to that of sex-linked recessive, but is less common, and in this case, the dominant gene is carried on the X chromosome. Disorders caused by this process include vitamin D-resistant rickets, weak bones in children, Rett syndrome, which results in impairments in language and coordination in babies, and Alport syndrome, end-stage kidney disease, and hearing loss. Here's a Punnett square demonstrating this sex-linked trait being recessive. So here's a healthy male, XY, and a carrier female, X. And then on this second X chromosome, she carries the recessive allele. What results is XX normal, so a healthy female, XY normal, a healthy male, a female that has one normal X chromosome and one with the recessive allele. In this case, the female does not express the recessive trait. And then a male that has the recessive allele on its X chromosome, and this male does express the recessive traits. Here's a pedigree chart for the X-linked recessive trait, similar to the one we just looked at, where the female is a carrier and the male was normal. Here's what their offspring end up being. One female carrier, a normal male, a normal female, and a male who exhibits the trait. Cytoplasmic inheritance. Pedigrees are also made for cytoplasmic inheritance, which covers the passing down of genes that occur in mitochondria, chloroplasts, viruses, and bacteria. Mitochondria and chloroplasts reproduce independently of the cell and occur when the energy needs of the cell increases. Mitochondrial diseases are passed down from the female. Pedigrees won't be shown for this type of inheritance.